We've all been transported to worlds beyond our wildest imagination with books. But books are also a great vehicle to get together and exchange ideas. Welcome to Books du Jour. Come and join our authors at the table. So I have three guests and three new books. My first guest is Barbara Schmitz, and she has The Practice, a book about inner balance, inner spirits, and finding kind of internal happiness. Correct?
Correct.
The Copernicus Complex by Scharf, correct? There's a British citizen teaching at Columbia, and it's all about the significance of the astronomy right now, the new theories. And something that doesn't seem related, but actually is very much related, Chaucer's Tale, the first trip or the first half of the life of Chaucer by Strohm, which was also at Columbia. Let me get started with you, Bob, because it seems we are very dissatisfied people in this modern life. Yes.
Yes.
So were you yourself a dissatisfied woman? You had to write that book, or you see it? You had to see what's going on around you to feel compelled to write a book.
The first part of my life as a child and as a young girl was pretty traumatic. I had a real dysfunctional, traumatic childhood, but had this little piece of me that was going to make it, be rich, famous, and do all the things that we all desire to have. So before the age of 30, I owned 4 McDonald's restaurants.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I became a very successful businesswoman and had everything. Had money, had stature, I was the best. I won every single award that McDonald's offers. And ultimately developed an eating disorder, bulimia. Oh. So eating disorders, wreak havoc from the inside out, and I had everything externally that I could possibly want, but was incredibly unhappy. So one day I woke up and a little voice in me said, go get help, and I checked myself into treatment in 1984 and turned my life around in this happiness can't come from the outside, and so I've been on this path of how do you balance internal and external. You don't have to leave the external world. You can still have all these great things, but really it has to come from within.
Yeah, and it goes to Paul's themes about, I'm talking about Fortuna, the wheel of fortune, whatever we call it in Latin or perfect English, the virtue of necessities, right? It seems like Chaucer, even though he was like 1400, it was 1386, the year, the big crack for him, the big revelation.
Serious ups and downs in Chaucer's life, and serious reversals, but one of his frequent sentiments in his poetry is making virtue of necessity and making the best of a bad situation. It's one of the things that's interested me in this book, yes.
But it's interesting that 700 years apart, it's still the same lesson, and we don't seem to be able to, we're not born with it. Right, unless we learn the lessons. Some people have crises, everyone does. Some people just don't recover, or they let themselves go, they become drunk and they just die of it, cirrhosis or whatever.
That's your test. Everything went as wrong as it could have gone for Chaucer in that year. He lost his job, he lost his circle of friends, he lost his political allies, he moved out of his city, went into exile, and that would have been enough to finish most people off, I think. But what he did in exile was made the decision to write the Canterbury Tales, for which we're all grateful today.
Do you feel like you need to be in seclusion to write a great work?
He wrote most of his work at a very busy time in his life when he actually had a job in the customs office on the waterfront and was fully consumed in his daylight hours and could only write in the evening when he got home. But nevertheless, he did find himself all of a sudden in seclusion in 1386 when he lost his position and having to reckon with a kind of solitude he hadn't experienced before. And fortunately for us, he at that point got a brilliant idea, which was inventing his audience of Canterbury pilgrims and inscribing it within his poem and creating a kind of portable audience that he could take with him to Kent, who would enjoy and react to poetry and argue about poetry and have literary quarrels and everything else he'd been used to in London.
And he was also very much an astronomer slash astrologer. It's hard to tell back those days.
He wrote a treatise on the use of the astrolabe.
That's the astrolabe, because
he's a remarkably versatile person.
You're from the country of Chaucer. I'm sure you've been to Canterbury.
Yes, I have once briefly.
Oh, all right, probably on the way to France or Calais.
Of course.
Yeah. You talk about the stars. We listen to Bob and Paul. It seems like there's some kind of order in the universe we can control by having will. It's not so deterministic. And you smile. I can see the grin on your face already. You worry very much about chaos, right? And you talk about Copernicus, and there's one word I kept butting on, it's mediocrity.
Yeah, well, so the book is obviously a book about science, and it's really a book telling the story of where we're at in answering this deep, ancient question, which is, are we alone in the universe? Is there something special about us? After Copernicus placing the sun at the center of everything, we developed this notion, and it's a very important, useful notion. It's behind much of science as it has developed over the centuries following Copernicus, that we're mediocrity. There is cosmic mediocrity, that no place is special in the universe, and by extension, ourselves, life on Earth, cannot be special, cannot be unique, and so we can't be alone.
But it's a strong judgment about ourselves.
It is a judgment.
It could just be like we're not the center, that's one thing, but it's mediocrity. It's very precise, it's very
it is.
to the point.
Part of the reason for writing the book is to try to dig into that in a scientific way, to ask, well, is science leading us to some better understanding of what is actually quite an emotional thing at an ordinary level? Trying to unpack that, peel that apart, and ask, well, are there really things that tell us that perhaps life here is somewhat unusual, special, or not, and how does that balance against this enormous universe that's been here for 13.8 billion years and is filled with hundreds of billions of galaxies, each of which has hundreds of billions of stars with hundreds of billions of planets.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
It's a big subject, it's a big topic.
Yeah. How did you get involved with that?
My day job is, as a scientist, is looking for planets around other stars, trying to understand environments in the universe that might be suitable for life, trying to answer these questions. And as a child, I think I was drawn to the idea of space, the idea that my existence was a microcosm. My existence was a small piece of something bigger. And I think what child hasn't had that thought at some point? You know, what's outside, what's beyond here, what's beyond my immediate experience? And of course, we can all, at some level, have that experience of the great by looking up at the night sky.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been common to all of us, to Chaucer, to all of us as children growing up. So the interesting thing is that life as a phenomenon, it's extraordinarily persistent, at least here.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I try to answer in the book, or address in the book, is, does that mean it's persistent elsewhere too? What can we draw from this one example?
Yeah. We talk about resilience.
Yeah.
And crisis paramount to display your resilience, or whether you have it or not?
Well, I think it's so perfect when you talk about space and outer space and the vastness, and it's the same thing within. We have this vast outer space. People are always searching and looking, and whoa, what's the next planet? What's the next great thing outside? My whole work is about what's the great next thing inside, that there's just as much vastness and space inside, a whole galaxy inside, and when we really start listening and getting a little bit quiet, and how can we sustain this in our lives on an everyday, you really recognize it's the same. It mirrors each other. The external mirrors the internal mirrors the external, and if we can live in that balance of both, internal and external, and really explore the space that we have within. We don't think that we have space within. We think that we're just out here to go, and we can't, we don't have a choice. We have so many choices and so much freedom when we really start to discover that space within. I love the science mirror.
But is it freedom? I mean, you're talking about your dream of having 4 McDonald's and being rich and famous when you're 25. It seems to be the motto these days. Is it really a choice, or is it more like social pressure, or is it just the desires of others?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I think that was a desire, and that wasn't really choice. That was the external saying to me, this is how you become famous, or this is how you make it, or this is what society deems you important. Whether it's owning restaurants, or becoming a professor, or becoming whatever it is, it matters what your title is in the external world. That's how you make it. And when I made it, as a woman especially, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I didn't feel special, and I didn't feel inside all these things that society says this is when you really make it.
You mean special or fulfilled? Would you feel contented? Or?
Yeah, exactly. I had everything, but I still was lacking in that feeling of feeling not only content, but worthy. I felt still incomplete.
I mean, you had enough life behind you to look at what's going on. Do you feel like we're completely misguided these days, or is it more intensified, the consumerism, or values we are running after?
I think it's speeded up. And I think actually we're going to get to this place that I'm talking about a lot quicker. I think we're hungry today to try to find that balance. We don't really want to give up things in the external world, but we want to have that sense of groundedness. And when I say peace, I mean strength, that completeness. I don't mean that we're going to all sit on a cloud and nothing's ever going to bother us, but that things can happen in the external world as it does, but not feel that we're at the mercy of it. I feel like with science, the way science is going and the way they enter, that we're going to start coming together with this balance that's going to be pretty magnificent here in the next decade or so.
I mean, I feel like there's a tremendous thrust for some sort of internal, more fulfilling life. And yet again, I was reading in the New York Times about a week ago about these meditation places are becoming the new hub for networking.
Yeah.
So it's sort of sort of defying what it's all about.
Well, and it's kind of I think you try to demystify that word meditation too. It's not about going someplace, going in a cave or leaving society or leaving the world. It's about how do I just come inside just for 5 minutes every day.
Yes.
Just to kind of unplug from the external, plug into the internal, and then go back to the external. Yeah, checking in, exactly. Check in with yourself.
Paul, I was very impressed what you managed to do with these 493 records, with the 593 records. The story you come up with is like, it's like reading a mystery novel, almost like Umberto Eco, The Name of the Roses, you know? How long of a process was that?
I spent a couple of years at it, and the thing about the life records is that they're very particular and they're very finite. And so Chaucer will be given a cash award for this, or he'll be given a passport to travel here, or the king awards him a pitcher of wine daily on the waterfront, that kind of thing. And these are all highly specific, and the question when you're writing a biography is how to turn these specific facts, or you could almost call them factoids, into narrative. How do you narrate these facts? And if you live with them, think about them. For instance, the fact that the king awards Chaucer a pitcher of wine on the waterfront means that he's expected to show up for work. He gets a pitcher of wine every day, but only if he's there. And so we learn from that, okay, they really wanted him on the waterfront. They wanted him doing his job. And as it turned out, his job was an enabler of immense revenue for a few citizens of London, and finally for the crown itself. And so you can look at this record of the pitcher of wine on the waterfront and you can say, okay, this is just local color, or it's fun that he got a pitcher of wine. But if you look at it yet a while longer, you can see that, okay, it's part of a larger plan to insert Chaucer into the governance of the city in a way that could make a difference for the king and the king's allies. And there you have the beginning of narrative. You have the beginning of a story that can be told. And I'd say that's true of a lot of these other life records too, is you got a record, and when you live with it for a while, you can figure out how to narrate it.
But in relation to what Barbara was saying about A Quest for Happiness, you read the characters from Brembe, the mayor of New York, to London, to Catherine, the sister of Philip. They were ambitious people.
I entitle one of the subsections of my book, If You Swim with Sharks, Don't Bleed. And indeed, he is in with ruthless people, and he's been in with people who are making fortunes all around him. And his job is mainly to look the other way and let this happen. But nevertheless, it was a precarious existence. And finally, in the year I talk about in this book, some of his allies in the City of London turned against him with disastrous effects for his career, but happy effects for him as a creator of English literature.
We know how he reacted when he got pretty much forced out of his life he had, security, safety, friends, money, wife, and everything else.
Until he wrote the Canterbury Tales, his idea had been you write a poem, and he would indeed write it. He wasn't improvising it. He'd go home and write a poem, but then you read it to a circle of friends in an intimate situation, not unlike this, or maybe to 10 or 12 or 15 or 20, but it's a personal process. And when he's writing the Canterbury Tales, he gets the idea that, well, wait a minute, maybe this could circulate in manuscript and a larger audience could read it. And he does form a new ambition around the Canterbury Tales. In fact, I'll just mention one funny line in the Canterbury Tales. He's talking about the Miller's Tale, and he's saying this might upset people because it's a bawdy tale. He says, if you don't like what you're hearing, turn over the page and read another tale. And this is the first evidence of Chaucer thinking of having an absent reading public that at the end of his life he's writing for.
We can call him, he was a moralist.
A moralist?
Yes.
He has a moral compass. I mean, his pilgrims are judged. I mean, they're lovable, they're funny, they're endearing, but he also presents them in a way that allows us to form a judgment of them and a judgment of their character. And in that sense, he certainly is a moralist and something of a moral satirist.
The judgment at the end by misbehaving or making the wrong judgment is always kind of a payoff. Yes. From my memory of Chaucer, whether it's catalogical or sexual, someone does something they should not be doing, and then they pay the price for those that wheel of fortune, basically.
He's a great satirist because he puts the information in your hands, that is in the reader's hands, and lets the reader make the final judgment. So in that sense, reading Chaucer is a very participatory exercise.
Is the universe that fair towards us, toward the Earth? I mean, it's like we're dangling on the side. The stars are born over here, and then the sun becomes supernova, and they just do what they have to do.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. The universe is full of these cycles, these interlinked cycles and networks, and places of great chaos, places of somewhat greater order, and life and planets seem to emerge in between all of that somehow. Some people have argued that it's very interesting that the universe is suitable for life. And this has been discussed at some length, and people have come up with this idea of the Theanthropic Principle.
Sure.
Which is to say that our existence is actually telling us something important about the nature of the universe. Now, this is very interesting because it could just be the observer bias. Because if it wasn't like this, we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't make these observations. So it has to be that way. But for physicists, that's a very tricky and disquieting notion, and especially if this is the only universe.
For your field, or for at least where you are, is it the main question is to know, is there life somewhere else over there, or is it really what was before the Big Bang? And was the Big Bang just one of parallel universes? It might be several of them. I mean, that's the holy grail of the big question, right?
Absolutely. And
what came before that?
And the notion of multiple realities, multiple universes, or parallel realities, in a sense, has been invoked to answer this discomfort with the notion that the universe is somehow just right for us to be here. Maybe other things too, but certainly for us. Because if there are many realities, then sure, we just happen to be in one of those realities that's okay for life. It's a particularly fertile spot. And we don't know the answer to that yet.
The European managed to land a probe at speed of light. European, not American, not ESA. On the comet. Is a comet a cluster of rocks, or is actually there's a core, which is the side of the Earth, or something?
Comets are interesting. They're a mix. They're a mix of ice and dust and rocks and stuff. They're a jumbled mess, we think. We don't think...
Mangled.
Yeah, mangled. Mangled is not a bad one. Then they're unrefined, shall we say. They haven't been processed further. Larger objects in our solar system get processed further. They get hot inside, they build up heat, and they begin to differentiate. They begin to have a core, a discernible core, and other things. Comets really are primitive.
Talk to us about the Copernicus Complex itself. What is it?
Well, I guess the complex is this hang-up that we have, this tension between the notion of cosmic mediocrity, that we are a speck on a crumb in a vast cavern of space, and that makes a great deal of sense, and it's part of our rational picture of the universe. But at the same time, we do fight against this notion, well, maybe there's something special. And it's not just on an emotional level. Scientists confront this too. And there are pieces of scientific evidence that suggest that our existence, certainly humans, complex organisms like us, might be quite unlikely. And if it's that unlikely, then it may not have happened in many other places in the universe. So then suddenly we become special, which of course is...
Are we talking spiritual special, or special in just a biological way?
In a biological way, really in a quantitative way. And so one of the interesting questions is, so this tension between these ideas, I think, affects even scientists. Even scientists are influenced by things that they perhaps shouldn't be. So part of the book is trying to talk about that, is discussing how do we look past our preconceptions about the nature of life and about something of which we are a part, and that's very difficult.
Is there a lot of guesswork going on in your field, or is it finding clues and doing color by number? Or I have the picture, I understand.
Well, science at some level
to some extent it's about that, right?
Yeah, well, so guesswork, in science, there's a lot of guesswork. Right? And the idea is you make a guess and then you challenge it with observation and data.
Yeah.
That's the scientific method. But when you take the analytical tools of science, tools of probability and inference, and apply it in as objective a way as possible, what you learn is we actually have no clue.
Barbara, what prompted you to write your book? Because you could have had your experience and your reversal of fortune and move on with your life, right?
Yes.
Why did you feel compelled to write, to put it on paper?
Well, my transformation, the idea that I could be so unhappy and so successful and then be very happy and successful was compelling. So I started teaching community courses at the university, helping people, really get this idea that you can have a really phenomenal, big, successful life and feel grounded, from within. And this moved me, and it got better and better and bigger, and people wanted to know more. And so writing the book, and I think you go back to looking at these great saints and mystics and all these teachers that teach all of this stuff, when you read about them, and I spent decades studying every single religion and every single person that really made it, they had incredibly difficult, struggling, hard lives. Nobody was given anything. So that's my passion. You look at Mahatma Gandhi, or you look at
they're not working at McDonald's.
No,
Okay.
no, but they did they set out to free, or, and the Dalai Lama now talk about science. I think it matters greatly that you live your life in the moment, knowing what you're doing here, why you're here, and you feel good about that. You can do all these great things in the external world, but how do you really, there's that deep knowing inside too, that exploration inside when you're sitting there with yourself in quiet for 5 minutes. Yeah. And you're thinking the thoughts, but there's a voice within. Who is that voice within? What is it? So it's really getting in touch with and connected to that.
But that takes an awareness.
Totally.
With awareness, you run around like a blind monkey, right?
It takes a deep awareness and a desire.
Yeah.
People are really nervous, scared, anxious, with everything going on in the external world. So how do you get a balance of, I can't control that, but I have great deep control from the inside, and I really can get that deep knowing that I am okay and I can thrive. It's a matter of control, really.
How chaotic was Chaucer's world about the Black Death and the 100 Years' War?
Chaotic indeed. But what I was going to say about what we've just been talking about is that Chaucer spends a lot of time talking about the question of free will. He's very interested in free will.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this would be the form, I think, that these issues took for him. And his question there is, do we have ultimate responsibility for our choices and our actions? And he lives in a very religious situation where it's understood that God knows all that has happened and will happen. And so then the question becomes, okay, does this absolve us of our individual responsibility? And his answer to that is not at all.
Not at all.
Well, he does believe in a deity who knows what will happen, because just because the deity knows what will happen, the deity doesn't make it happen, doesn't constrain it to happen. We still have individual choice of our actions and responsibility for our actions. And that's a kind of a locus for him that he returns to a number of times.
The story of free will and are we responsible for our agencies, it comes out over again each time we have a war. For example, am I acting out of the order of my superiors, or am I actually responsible for my action? I mean, the World War II was riddled with those cases. And even though we can look into the standard probe on a comet, those basic ethical, moral questions have not really evolved, and we still love to, where are we, philosophical questions.
Absolutely. Chaucer, at every point, is very interested in not just what people do, but the sequence of thought and reasoning by which they arrive at the decision to do what they do, and it matters greatly to him. It's one of the things that lends a kind of dimensionality to his portraits of his pilgrims and the other characters that he creates, is he presents them as people who are in I guess I'd say, a deliberative mode, who are making thoughtful choices about themselves and their lives.
I want to wrap with the question of ethics and morals in science. Do we have some of the Galileos these days? They come up with this theory they just throw out there, like a supernova, sun is going to explode because lack of ions or hydrogens or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think increasingly people are willing to say almost anything.
To get attention?
Yeah, and some of that is because we're now also interconnected, that there are so many voices that to get attention, people are perhaps a little more willing to say things that are risky. I mean, this happened just this last year. A number of scientists, cosmologists, claim to have detected with a very sophisticated experiment signs of the physics of the early universe that would perhaps support this idea of multiple universes. And it made the headlines. They made this big claim, and it was before anything had been reviewed by their peers. And it was as if they really felt that today you have to do that, otherwise you'll lose momentum. So I think the way we're becoming interconnected is altering our tendency to say outrageous things, and that's both good and bad. It's both good and bad.
Well, I think it's a beautiful place to wrap, and if people cannot take this information, you can always go to Barb's book, The Practice, Barb Schmitz, and you say you just started in England, but this is already out in America,
Yes.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I had Caleb Scharf, the Copernicus Complex, this is what you were just talking about, all this delightful about the cosmos, and the Chaucer tale, the one tale, and the one sold, the first, 1386, yeah, by Paul Strohm. Thank you very much for being our books du jour, and wish you all the best with your books and sales and getting rich and famous, like everyone else. That's why